The council deliberated for 3 hours while Danny waited in a small chamber adjacent to the main hall. Margaret and Dr. Carter stayed with him, but none of them spoke much. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the air, and Danny found himself thinking about all the people back on Earth whose lives would be affected by the outcome. Through the chamber's window, Danny could see ships arriving and departing from the space station. Each vessel represented a different world and a different civilization that had earned its place in the galactic community. The diversity was incredible, and he tried to imagine Earth ships joining that peaceful traffic between the stars. "Whatever happens, you represented humanity well," Margaret said finally. "You showed them our capacity for growth, compassion, and creative problem-solving. No one could have done better." Dr. Carter nodded in agreement. The mechanical test was particularly impressive. Several council members commented that humans approach problems differently than other species. "Your intuitive methods complement their analytical techniques." When the council reconvened, the chamber felt different. The alien representative seemed more settled, as if difficult decisions had been made. The council speaker approached the podium with a formal bearing that made Danny's heart race. "The Galactic Confederation Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's application for membership," the speaker announced. "After extensive deliberation, we have voted to grant Earth provisional membership status." Danny felt relief wash over him like a physical force. Provisional membership was not full acceptance, but it was far better than rejection. Margaret had explained that provisional status allowed for gradual integration and ongoing evaluation over a period of years. "However," the speaker continued, "this decision comes with specific conditions that must be met for membership to become permanent. The first condition was the establishment of a formal diplomatic corps to facilitate communication between Earth and the Confederation. Danny would serve as the first human ambassador, but additional representatives would need to be trained and appointed. The second condition involved sharing certain technologies that could help solve Earth's environmental and social problems. However, weapons technology would be strictly limited until humanity demonstrated consistent peaceful behavior. The third condition was the most challenging. Earth would need to establish a unified planetary government within 10 years. The Confederation could not work effectively with hundreds of separate human nations that often disagreed with each other. "The Council recognizes that these conditions are ambitious," the speaker said. "However, we believe that humanity has the potential to meet these challenges with appropriate guidance and support." Several alien representatives stood to address Danny directly. A member of the Nurturers expressed hope that human creativity could contribute to solving environmental problems that affected multiple worlds. One of the builders mentioned interest in human engineering approaches that had been demonstrated during the mechanical test. Most surprisingly, a representative from the philosophers indicated that human emotional intelligence might offer valuable perspectives on consciousness and moral development. This was high praise from a species that had transcended physical form through pure intellectual achievement. The council speaker explained the next steps in the process. Danny would return to Earth with a small diplomatic team to begin establishing formal contact between humanity and the Confederation. The initial focus would be on environmental technology and peaceful space exploration. The young human's demonstration of compassion and problem-solving ability convinced many council members that humanity deserves this opportunity, the speaker said. "However, continued membership will depend on your species' actions during the provisional period." As the council session ended, representatives from various species approached Danny to introduce themselves and offer assistance with Earth's integration process. The beings that had seemed so alien and intimidating a few hours earlier now felt like potential friends and partners. Margaret and Dr. Carter escorted Danny back to their ship for the journey home. As they prepared to depart from the space station, Danny took one last look at the incredible diversity of alien life that surrounded them. Soon Earth would be part of this vast community, and humanity would no longer be alone in the universe. The journey back to Earth took the same 7 days, but the time passed quickly as Danny learned about the technologies and knowledge that would soon be shared with humanity. Clean energy systems that could end dependence on fossil fuels, medical techniques that could eliminate most diseases, agricultural methods that could feed everyone on Earth without environmental damage. More importantly, Danny learned about the philosophical and cultural exchanges that would enrich human understanding. Art forms that incorporated dimensions beyond human perception. Mathematical concepts that revealed new ways of understanding reality. Stories and wisdom from civilizations that had faced and overcome the same challenges that confronted humanity. When their ship landed back at the warehouse facility in Chicago, Danny felt like a different person than the mechanic who had helped an elderly woman in the rain just 2 weeks earlier. He carried with him the knowledge that humanity had been accepted into something magnificent and the responsibility to help his species live up to that trust. Margaret explained that the process of revealing galactic contact to Earth's population would be gradual and carefully managed. World leaders would be briefed first, followed by scientists and other experts. The general public would learn about the Confederation over a period of months as humanity prepared for its new role in galactic society. Danny would serve as Earth's primary ambassador, splitting his time between the Confederation capital and various locations on Earth. His mechanical background would be valuable in adapting alien technologies for human use, while his demonstrated character would help maintain the trust that the Council had placed in humanity. The warehouse facility would become Earth's first embassy to the Galactic Confederation. Other sites around the world would be established as humanity developed its diplomatic capabilities. Scientists, engineers, and cultural experts would work alongside alien advisors to prepare Earth for full membership. As Danny prepared to return to his normal life, at least temporarily, he thought about the incredible chain of events that had led to this moment. His simple decision to help Margaret during a rainstorm had opened the door to the stars for all of humanity. Margaret walked him to the facility's exit as the first rays of dawn appeared over Chicago. "You changed the course of human history with a single act of kindness," she said. "Never underestimate the power of compassion to transform the universe." Danny returned to his apartment and called his sister Kate to let her know he was back from his training program. He could not tell her the truth yet, but soon she and everyone else on Earth would know that humanity was no longer alone. The future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities that had been unimaginable just weeks earlier. Looking out his window at the city waking up to another ordinary day, Danny smiled. The people below had no idea that their world was about to change forever. But he knew that when they learned the truth, most humans would rise to meet the challenge with the same capacity for growth and goodness that had convinced an alien council to take a chance on their species. The story of humanity's journey to the stars had begun with rain, kindness, and the recognition that character matters more than technology in building bridges between worlds. The council chamber was vast and circular, with hundreds of seats arranged in ascending tiers around a central platform. Each section was designed to accommodate different alien species with their unique environmental needs. Danny could see areas filled with water for aquatic beings, chambers with different atmospheric compositions, and platforms that seemed to contain pure energy. Margaret led Danny to the center platform where a simple podium waited. The scale of the chamber was overwhelming, and Danny felt incredibly small, surrounded by so many alien representatives. The diversity of life forms was staggering, and he tried to identify the different species he had learned about during the journey. The Zephyrians were easy to spot due to their skin that shifted through various colors as they communicated with each other. The builders looked like large insects with intricate metallic exoskeletons that reflected the chamber's lighting. The philosophers appeared as glowing orbs of energy that floated above their designated area. Dr. Carter took a position near the platform where she could provide translation services if needed. Her nervous expression reminded Danny that even she was not completely certain how the council would react to humanity's request for membership. A being that Margaret identified as the council speaker approached the podium. The speaker was tall and thin, with features that seemed to combine elements from several different species. Their role was to facilitate discussions and ensure that all viewpoints were heard fairly. "We gathered today to consider the application of the species known as humans from the planet Earth," the speaker announced in a voice that somehow reached every corner of the chamber despite not being particularly loud. "The representative Daniel Morrison will present their case." Danny stepped up to the podium and looked out at the assembled alien representatives. The sight was both terrifying and inspiring. These beings represented civilizations that had existed for thousands of years, and had achieved levels of technology and wisdom that humans could barely imagine. "My name is Danny Morrison, and I am here to speak for humanity," Danny began, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I am not a politician or a scientist. I fix cars for a living in a city called Chicago, but I believe that makes me qualified to represent ordinary humans and our potential as a species." Several alien representatives leaned forward with interest. Danny had been advised to emphasize his common background rather than trying to present himself as an exceptional human. The council wanted to understand typical human character rather than humanity's elite. "I know that many of you have concerns about human behavior based on our history and current problems," Danny continued. "These concerns are justified. Humans have fought wars, damaged our environment, and sometimes treated each other poorly. We are not perfect, and we still have much to learn." A member of a species called the Guardian stood to address him. The being was covered in what looked like living armor and spoke in a deep, resonant voice. "If humans acknowledge their violent tendencies, why should we believe they can coexist peacefully with other species?" Danny had practiced this type of question extensively. Because humans are capable of learning and growing. When we understand the consequences of our actions, most humans choose to do better. Our conflicts usually come from fear and misunderstanding, rather than inherent aggression. "Can you provide evidence of this claimed capacity for growth?" asked a representative from the analysts, a species known for their logical approach to everything. Danny thought about examples from human history that demonstrated positive change. "Humans used to accept slavery as normal, but we recognized it was wrong and fought to end it. We used to believe that women were inferior to men, but we learned better. We are beginning to understand that we must protect our environment rather than exploit it." A ripple of interest passed through the chamber. Several species had undergone similar moral evolution during their own development and could relate to humanity's gradual progress. One of the nurturers, a being that looked like a walking tree with glowing leaves, expressed concern about human treatment of other Earth species. "Your people have driven many animals to extinction and continued to destroy natural habitats. How can we trust you to respect other forms of life?" This was one of the most difficult questions Danny faced. He knew that human environmental record was genuinely troubling to many alien species. "You are right that humans have made serious mistakes in how we treat other life forms. But we are learning to do better. Many humans now work to protect endangered species and restore damaged ecosystems. The younger generation especially understands that all life is connected." The questioning continued for over an hour. Representatives from different species challenged Danny on various aspects of human behavior. Some were hostile, while others seemed genuinely curious about humanity's potential. Danny tried to remain calm and honest, acknowledging problems while demonstrating human capacity for positive change. A member of the builders asked about human technological development. "Your species has advanced rapidly in recent centuries, but much of your technology is focused on warfare. How can we be certain that humans will use advanced galactic technology responsibly?" "Human technology reflects our current level of understanding," Danny replied. "When we had limited resources, we competed with each other. As we learn more about the universe and our place in it, we can develop technology for cooperation instead of conflict. Contact with the Galactic Confederation would accelerate this positive development." One of the philosophers projected a question directly into Danny's mind, a deeply unsettling experience. "Human emotions seem to drive many of your decisions. How can a species ruled by feelings participate effectively in logical galactic governance?" Danny paused to consider this carefully. The question touched on something fundamental about human nature. Human emotions are not a weakness. They help us understand right and wrong and motivate us to help others. Yesterday I helped an elderly woman in the rain not because logic told me to, but because I felt compassion for her situation. Emotions guide humans toward moral behavior. This answer seemed to surprise some of the representatives. Many alien species viewed emotions as primitive remnants that should be overcome through evolution. Danny's suggestion that emotions could be valuable was a new perspective for them to consider. The council speaker called for a brief recess to allow representatives to discuss what they had heard. Danny stepped down from the podium feeling drained but cautiously optimistic. He had answered every question honestly and had not lost his temper despite some provocative challenges. Margaret approached him with an encouraging smile. "You did very well." Several species that were initially skeptical seemed to be reconsidering their positions. Dr. Carter was less optimistic. The Guardians and analysts remain concerned about human unpredictability. They prefer species that follow clear logical patterns. When the session resumed, the council speaker announced that there would be a final practical test. The council wishes to observe how the human representative responds to an actual problem-solving scenario. You will be presented with a mechanical challenge that has puzzled our engineers. A complex device was brought to the center platform. It appeared to be some kind of energy converter that had stopped functioning properly. The alien engineers had been unable to identify the problem, despite using their most advanced diagnostic equipment. Danny examined the device carefully, using the mechanical intuition he had developed over years of fixing cars. The technology was far more advanced than anything on Earth, but the basic principles of energy flow and mechanical stress were universal. After several minutes of study, Danny identified a subtle misalignment in one of the energy conduits. The problem was so small that the alien diagnostic equipment had missed it, but it was causing the entire system to operate inefficiently. Using tools provided by the engineers, Danny made a simple adjustment that restored the device to full functionality. The chamber fell silent as the alien engineers confirmed that the problem had been solved. Several species that specialized in technology began discussing the implications of Danny's approach. He had succeeded where their advanced analytical methods had failed by using intuitive problem-solving techniques. 2 days later, Danny found himself back at the warehouse facility, this time carrying a small bag with personal items. Margaret had advised him to bring photographs of family and friends along with a few objects that represented important memories. These items would help him stay connected to his humanity during the journey. The warehouse had been transformed overnight. What had appeared to be a building was actually a sophisticated spacecraft disguised to blend in with the surrounding area. Danny watched in amazement as walls retracted and the ceiling opened to reveal a sleek vessel that seemed to be made of the same glowing material he had seen inside the facility. Dr. Carter met him at the entrance wearing clothes that looked more like a uniform than a business suit. Her appearance seemed slightly different as well, as if she was no longer trying to appear completely human. Her movements were more fluid and her skin had a subtle luminescent quality. The journey to the Confederation capital will take 7 days, Dr. Carter explained as they walked through the ship. During that time, we will prepare you for what lies ahead. The interior of the spacecraft was unlike anything Danny had ever imagined. The corridors were wide and curved, creating a sense of flowing movement rather than rigid geometry. Soft lighting emanated from the walls themselves, and the air had a clean, fresh quality that reminded him of mountain springs. His quarters were surprisingly spacious and comfortable. The bed seemed to adjust automatically to his body shape, and the furniture could be reconfigured with simple voice commands. A large window showed the view outside, which was currently just the evening sky over Chicago. Margaret joined them for dinner in what she called the common area. The food was recognizable but somehow more flavorful than anything Danny had ever tasted. She explained that the ship's systems could analyze human nutritional needs and optimize each meal accordingly. Tomorrow we will begin your education about galactic politics, Margaret said. The process will be intensive but necessary. You need to understand the various species and their concerns about humanity. That night, Danny lay in his bed watching Earth grow smaller through the window. The planet looked peaceful and beautiful from space, with swirling clouds and blue oceans that seemed to glow in the sunlight. It was hard to believe that this small world contained all the violence and chaos that worried the alien civilizations. The next morning, Danny's education began in earnest. Dr. Carter connected him to a learning system that fed information directly into his brain through a device that felt like wearing a comfortable headband. The sensation was strange at first, but not unpleasant. Information flowed into his mind at an incredible rate. Danny learned about the history of the Galactic Confederation, which had been formed over 2,000 years ago when the first 5 species made contact with each other. The organization had grown slowly and carefully, adding new members only after extensive evaluation periods. He studied the major alien civilizations and their unique characteristics. The Zephyrians were a peaceful species that communicated through color changes in their skin. The builders were insect-like creatures that created incredible architectural wonders. The philosophers were beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form millennia ago. Each species had required different amounts of time to be accepted into the Confederation. Some had been admitted after just a few years of observation, while others had waited centuries to prove their worthiness. The evaluation process was designed to ensure that new members would contribute positively to galactic society. The key factor in every admission decision has been the species' capacity for cooperation and peaceful coexistence, Dr. Carter explained during a break in the learning sessions. The council must be convinced that humans can work with others rather than trying to dominate them. Danny learned about the specific concerns that various species had about humanity. The Guardians worried about human military technology and history of warfare. The Nurturers were concerned about environmental destruction and treatment of other Earth species. The Analysts questioned human emotional stability and decision-making processes. Each of these concerns is based on legitimate observations of human behavior, Margaret said during one of their discussions. Your job will be to acknowledge these problems while demonstrating that humanity is capable of growth and positive change. The learning process was exhausting but fascinating. Danny's brain seemed to expand as new concepts and ideas took root. He began to understand the complex relationships between different alien civilizations and the delicate balance that kept the Confederation functioning. On the fourth day of the journey, Danny practiced answering the types of questions he would face at the council meeting. Dr. Carter played the role of hostile alien representatives while Margaret observed and provided feedback. Why should we trust a species that cannot even maintain peace on its own planet? Dr. Carter asked in character as a skeptical council member. Humans are still learning, Danny replied. We have made mistakes, but we are working to correct them. Our conflicts often come from misunderstandings rather than inherent violence. When humans understand each other better, we cooperate very effectively. Margaret nodded approvingly. Good answer. You acknowledged the problem without making excuses, and you offered evidence of human potential for improvement. Danny practiced responding to increasingly difficult questions about human history, current global problems, and potential future behavior. Some of the scenarios were designed to make him angry or defensive, testing his ability to remain calm under pressure. The most important thing to remember is that you represent humanity's best qualities, Margaret advised. You do not need to defend every human action, but you must show the council that our species has the capacity for wisdom and growth. On the sixth day, they began to approach the Confederation capital. Danny watched through the ship's viewing area as the massive space station came into view. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a small city, with multiple levels and sections that housed different alien environments. Each species requires different atmospheric conditions and gravity levels, Dr. Carter explained as they docked with the station. The station is designed to accommodate hundreds of different life forms simultaneously. The docking process was smooth and quiet. Danny felt no sensation of movement as their ship connected with the station's port. When the doors opened, he stepped into an airlock that analyzed his biological needs and adjusted the environment accordingly. The main corridor of the station was a marvel of engineering. The ceiling was transparent, providing a view of the stars and other ships coming and going. Alien beings moved past in groups, some walking, others floating, and a few that seemed to glide across the floor without visible means of locomotion. Danny tried not to stare, but found it impossible to look away from the incredible diversity of life forms. Some aliens looked almost human, while others were so strange that he could barely comprehend their physical structure. Yet all of them moved with purpose and intelligence, going about their daily activities just like people in any city. Tomorrow the council will convene, Margaret said as they walked toward their quarters. You will have one opportunity to present humanity's case. Everything depends on your ability to convince them that your species deserves a place in the galactic community. That night, Danny sat in his room, looking out at the stars and thinking about everyone back on Earth. His sister Kate was probably working her shift at the hospital. Old Murphy was likely closing up the auto shop and heading home to his family. Millions of people were going about their daily lives without knowing that their future was about to be decided by a young mechanic from Chicago. Margaret told Danny that he could take 3 days to make his decision. She understood that the request was enormous and that he needed time to think about the implications. Dr. Carter drove him back to the city and gave him a special communication device that looked like a simple cell phone but felt warm to the touch. Contact. us when you are ready to give us your answer," Dr. Carter said as she dropped him off at his apartment. "Remember that this opportunity will not come again in your lifetime." Danny spent the first day trying to return to his normal routine. He went to work at Murphy's auto shop and attempted to focus on fixing cars. However, his mind kept returning to the incredible things he had seen and learned. The advanced technology, the images of alien civilizations, and the weight of representing humanity made concentration impossible. Old Murphy noticed that Danny was distracted and asked if everything was okay. Danny wanted to tell him the truth but knew that the story would sound completely insane. Instead, he said that he was considering the job offer from Dr. Carter and was having trouble making a decision. "Sometimes the biggest opportunities come when we least expect them," Murphy said while watching Danny struggle to install a simple brake pad. "If this chance can change your life for the better, you would be foolish not to take it." That evening, Danny walked through his neighborhood and really looked at the people around him. He saw Mrs. Patterson from down the hall helping a young mother carry groceries up the stairs. 3 teenagers were teaching an elderly man how to use his new smartphone with patience and humor. A group of neighbors had organized a cleanup effort for the local park. But Danny also witnessed the darker side of human nature. He saw a man yell at a cashier over a small mistake. 2 drivers got into a heated argument over a parking space. A group of kids threw trash on the ground right next to a garbage can. The complexity of human behavior was on full display. On the second day, Danny called his sister Kate and told her he needed to talk. They met at their favorite coffee shop near the hospital where she worked. Kate could tell immediately that something important was bothering her brother. "You look like you have seen a ghost," Kate said as they sat down with their drinks. "What is going on with this job offer?" Danny struggled with how much to tell her. The truth was so incredible that he was not sure she would believe him. Instead, he described the opportunity in general terms, saying that it involved representing American workers in international negotiations. "It sounds like an amazing chance," Kate said. "But why did they choose you? There must be thousands of people more qualified for that kind of work." "That is what I keep wondering," Danny replied. "They say they want someone who represents ordinary American values and work ethic. But I feel completely unprepared for something this important." Kate reached across the table and took his hand. "Danny, you are one of the most decent people I know. You care about others and you always try to do the right thing. Maybe those are exactly the qualities they need." That afternoon, Danny visited the public library and read about diplomacy and international relations. The more he learned about how complex negotiations worked, the more inadequate he felt. Professional diplomats spent years studying languages, cultures, and political systems. How could he possibly compete with that level of expertise? But then Danny remembered what Margaret had said about authenticity being more important than polish. The Alien Council was not looking for someone who could recite policy positions or negotiate trade agreements. They wanted to understand the true character of humanity. On the third evening, Danny sat in his apartment and thought about all the people who had influenced his life. His parents had taught him to treat others with respect and kindness. His grandfather had shown him the satisfaction of working with his hands to solve problems. Old Murphy had demonstrated that helping customers was more important than making maximum profit. These were not famous people or great leaders. They were ordinary individuals who had chosen to live their lives according to basic principles of decency and fairness. If Danny was going to represent humanity, perhaps he should represent these values rather than trying to be something he was not. Danny picked up the communication device and activated it. Margaret's face appeared on the small screen almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for his call. "I have made my decision," Danny said. "I will do it. I will go to the council and speak for humanity." Margaret's expression showed both relief and excitement. "I am very pleased to hear that, Daniel. I believe you will serve your species well in this role." "I have some conditions," Danny continued. "I want to know exactly what will happen and what you expect from me. No more surprises or hidden tests." "Of course," Margaret agreed. "Complete transparency from this point forward. You deserve to know everything about the process and the challenges you will face." Margaret explained that Danny would need to leave Earth in 2 days. The journey to the Confederation capital would take 1 week using their fastest ships. During the voyage, he would receive intensive training about galactic politics, alien cultures, and the specific concerns that different species had about humanity. The training process uses advanced learning techniques that will allow you to absorb Information much faster than normal human education, Margaret said. However, the experience can be overwhelming at first. Dr. Carter would serve as his guide and translator during the mission. She had extensive experience working with human psychology and would help him navigate the complex social dynamics of the Confederation Council. What exactly will I need to do at the council meeting? Danny asked. You will present humanity's case for membership and answer questions from the representatives, Margaret replied. Some species will be supportive, but others will challenge you aggressively. You must demonstrate both human potential and the ability to handle conflict constructively. Margaret warned him that some council members would try to provoke him into showing anger or aggression. These species believed that humans were inherently violent and would look for any evidence to support their position. The key is to remain calm and respond with reason rather than emotion, Margaret advised. Show them that humans can control their impulses and think rationally under pressure. Danny asked about his family and friends and what they would be told about his absence. Margaret explained that a cover story had been prepared involving a special training program for his new job. Kate and Murphy would be told that he was attending a 2-week intensive course out of state. When I return, will anything change for me personally? Danny asked. That depends on the outcome of the council meeting, Margaret replied. If humanity is accepted into the Confederation, you would likely serve as one of Earth's first galactic ambassadors. If we are rejected, you would return to your normal life with the knowledge that you did everything possible. Danny thought about the magnitude of what he was undertaking. In just a few days, he would leave Earth and travel to a space station filled with hundreds of alien species. The future of humanity's relationship with the galaxy would depend on his ability to represent his species effectively. I am scared, Danny admitted. This is so much bigger than anything I have ever done. Fear is natural and appropriate, Margaret said gently. What matters is that you are willing to act despite that fear. This is exactly the kind of courage that the Council needs to see from humanity. Danny stared at Margaret in disbelief. The request seemed impossible and completely beyond anything he was qualified to handle. He was just a regular person who fixed cars for a living. The idea of representing humanity to alien civilizations was terrifying. I think you have the wrong person, Danny said finally. I am not a diplomat or a scientist. I barely graduated from high school and I have never even been outside the United States. Margaret smiled gently. Those facts do not disqualify you, Daniel. In fact, they may be exactly what we need. The Galactic Confederation is not looking for human politicians or academics. They want to understand the true nature of your species. Dr. Carter activated another screen that showed recordings of Danny from the previous evening. He watched himself approach Margaret on the bench and help her to the diner. The images were clearly taken from multiple angles by hidden cameras. We have been observing you for several months, Dr. Carter explained. Your behavior patterns, your decision-making process, and your interactions with others. Yesterday's test was the culmination of a long evaluation. Danny felt uncomfortable knowing that he had been watched without his knowledge. How many other people have you been testing? Thousands, Margaret replied. We have conducted similar tests in cities around the world. Most humans failed to meet our standards for various reasons. Some ignored the person in distress. Others helped, but only after calculating potential benefits. A few were helpful but showed signs of aggression or instability. The screen showed brief clips of other test scenarios. Danny saw people walking past aliens disguised as homeless individuals, elderly people, and disabled persons. In most cases, the humans simply ignored the situation or offered minimal help. A few people stopped, but their body language suggested they were uncomfortable or impatient. Your response was different, Margaret continued. When you saw me in distress, you acted immediately without hesitation. Your brain patterns showed no calculation of personal benefit or concern for inconvenience. You helped because you felt it was the right thing to do. Dr. Carter brought up a new display showing complex charts and graphs. We monitored your neural activity during the encounter. Your empathy centers were highly active while your self-interest areas remained minimal. This suggests genuine altruistic behavior rather than social performance. Danny studied the brain scans but could not understand most of the technical information. However, the basic message was clear. They had been analyzing his thoughts and emotions during what he believed was a private moment of helping another person. This feels like a violation of privacy, Danny said. You were inside my head without permission. You are correct, and I apologize for that intrusion, Margaret replied. However, the evaluation was necessary to ensure accuracy. Too much depends on this decision to rely on surface observations alone. Margaret explained that the Galactic Confederation Council was deeply divided about humanity. Some species argued that humans were too primitive and violent to join the galactic community. Others believed that humanity had potential but needed more time to mature as a civilization. The council meets every 50 years to evaluate potential new member species, Margaret said. Earth has been on the waiting list for 2 evaluation cycles. If humanity is rejected again, it will be another 50 years before the next opportunity. Dr. Carter displayed images of the Galactic Confederation capital, a massive space station that orbited a distant star. The station houses representatives from over 300 different worlds, she explained. Each species has a voice in determining which civilizations are ready for membership. The diversity of alien life was staggering. Danny saw beings that looked like walking trees, creatures that appeared to be made of living crystal, and species that seemed to exist as pure energy. The variety challenged every assumption he had about what life could look like. Many of these species achieved space travel thousands of years before humans developed agriculture, Margaret continued. They view Earth as a young and potentially dangerous world. Your species' history of warfare and environmental destruction concerns them greatly. Danny thought about the daily news reports of conflicts, pollution, and social problems that filled human media. From an outside perspective, humanity probably did look chaotic and destructive, but he also knew there was more to the story. Humans do good things too, Danny said. We help each other during disasters. We create art and music. We take care of animals and try to protect the environment. Yes, Margaret agreed. That is exactly the argument we need to make to the council. Your species has problems but also has remarkable potential for growth and positive change. The question is whether the council will be willing to take that risk. Dr. Carter explained that previous human representatives had been carefully selected diplomats and scientists. However, their presentations had been too polished and formal to convince the Council of Humanity's genuine nature. The alien civilization suspected that these representatives were not typical examples of human behavior. The Council wants to see authentic human character, Dr. Carter said. They need to understand how average humans think and respond to moral challenges. Your background and personality make you an ideal representative. Margaret stood and walked to a window that showed the city in the distance. In your culture, there is a saying about actions speaking louder than words. The council has heard many speeches about human potential. What they need to see is an actual human demonstrating the qualities that make your species worthy of membership. The weight of the responsibility was overwhelming. Danny would not just be speaking for himself but for every person on Earth. Billions of lives would be affected by the council's decision about humanity's future. What happens if I say no? Danny asked. Then we will find another representative, Margaret replied. However, time is running short and you are our best candidate. Few humans have demonstrated the combination of moral character and practical intelligence that you possess. Danny thought about his sister Kate and old Murphy and all the other people in his life. They were flawed but fundamentally good individuals who deserved a chance to be part of something larger than themselves. Humanity had problems but also had the capacity for incredible kindness and creativity. If I agree to do this, what would be required? Danny asked. Margaret turned back to face him with a hopeful expression. You would need to travel to the Confederation capital and present humanity's case to the Council. We would provide accelerated training to help you understand galactic politics and alien cultures. The process would take approximately 2 weeks. Dr. Carter added that Danny's mechanical skills would also be valuable. Human engineering approaches are unique in many ways. The Council would be interested in seeing how you solve technical problems that have challenged other species. Danny realized that this was the opportunity of a lifetime, not just for himself but for all of humanity. The chance to join a galactic community and learn from hundreds of advanced civilizations could transform life on Earth in ways that were impossible to imagine. Dr. Carter picked up Danny in her black car the next morning. The drive took them far outside the city through areas that Danny had never seen before. They passed old factories and empty lots until they reached a part of town that seemed almost abandoned. Most of the buildings were boarded up and weeds grew through cracks in the sidewalks. The facility was located in what appeared to be an old warehouse. From the outside, it looked like every other forgotten building in the area. The walls were gray concrete and most of the windows were either broken or covered with metal sheets. A rusty sign near the entrance was too faded to read clearly. Dr. Carter parked the car and led Danny to a door on the side of the building. She placed her hand on what looked like a normal metal handle, but Danny heard a soft beeping sound. The door opened with a quiet hiss that reminded him of the air brakes on a city bus. Inside the building was completely different from what Danny had expected. Instead of an empty warehouse, he found himself in a modern facility that looked more advanced than anything he had ever seen. The walls were smooth and white, with a subtle glow that seemed to come from within the material itself. The floors were made of something that felt solid but had a slight give to it when he walked. The lighting was soft, and even throughout the space without any visible bulbs or fixtures. Everything seemed to be built with curves instead of sharp corners, and the air had a clean smell that reminded Danny of the electronics store at the mall. The technology looked years ahead of anything he had seen in magazines or movies. Dr. Carter led him through several corridors that seemed to branch off in different directions. Danny noticed that there were no visible doors or room numbers, but somehow Dr. Carter knew exactly where she was going. They passed several people in similar business clothes who nodded politely, but did not stop to talk. "This is quite a setup," Danny said, looking around at the advanced equipment. "What kind of research foundation can afford all this?" "We have been very successful in our work," Dr. Carter replied. "Our funding comes from various sources who are interested in our results." They entered a large central room that reminded Danny of the mission control center he had seen in movies about space travel. Multiple screens showed information that he could not understand, and people worked at stations with equipment that defied easy description. The technology seemed to respond to touch and voice commands in ways that felt almost magical. Margaret was waiting for them in the center of the room, but she looked completely different from the elderly woman Danny had met in the rain. She stood tall and confident, no longer appearing frail or helpless. Her silver hair was now styled perfectly, and she wore clothes that seemed to be made from a material that shifted color slightly as she moved. "Daniel Morrison," Margaret said, approaching him with a warm smile. "Thank you for coming. I hope the drive was not too difficult." Her voice was the same but carried a different quality now. The formal way of speaking was more pronounced, and there was an authority in her tone that had not been there before. She moved with the confidence of someone who was clearly in charge of this operation. "You look different," Danny said, not sure how else to respond to the transformation. Margaret laughed softly. "Yes, I imagine I do. Yesterday I was playing a role that was necessary for our research. Today you can see me as I really am." She gestured for Danny to sit in a comfortable chair near one of the workstations. Dr. Carter took a position nearby and activated one of the screens. Images began to appear showing what looked like star charts and technical diagrams that Danny did not recognize. "I must apologize for the deception," Margaret continued. "Yesterday I presented myself as a helpless elderly woman in order to observe your natural response to someone in need. This was the final test in a long evaluation process." Danny felt confused and slightly angry. "Test? What kind of test? Why was I being tested?" Margaret sat down across from him and her expression became serious. "Daniel, what I am about to tell you will be difficult to believe. My real name is Veltar Margaret, and I am not from this planet. I am what your people would call an alien." The words hit Danny like a physical blow. He looked around the room at all the advanced technology and the people working at their stations. Suddenly, many things began to make sense. The unusual way Margaret and Dr. Carter spoke. The technology that seemed years ahead of anything on Earth. The way they had known about his encounter with Margaret. "That is impossible," Danny said. But even as he spoke the words, he knew they were probably true. "I understand your skepticism," Margaret replied. "However, I assure you that everything I am telling you is accurate. I serve as a cultural assessor for what we call the Galactic Confederation. This is an organization of many different worlds that work together for mutual benefit." Dr. Carter activated another screen that showed images of planets and star systems. "Earth has been under observation for several decades," she explained. "My species has been studying human culture and behavior to determine if your people are ready to join the galactic community." Danny tried to process what he was hearing. The idea that aliens existed and were studying Earth seemed like something from a science fiction movie. But the evidence was all around him in the form of technology that was clearly beyond human capabilities. "Why are you telling me this?" Danny asked. "Because your actions yesterday demonstrated something important about human nature," Margaret replied. When you saw me in distress, you chose to help despite the inconvenience to yourself. You showed compassion for a stranger without expecting anything in return. Margaret explained that the Galactic Confederation had concerns about humanity. Many species viewed humans as potentially violent and self-centered, based on their historical records and current global conflicts. The various wars and environmental problems on Earth made other civilizations nervous about contact. However, Margaret continued, your behavior yesterday suggests that humans are capable of genuine altruism. This is a quality that is highly valued in the galactic community. Dr. Carter brought up more images showing different alien species and their homeworlds. The Confederation includes hundreds of different civilizations, she explained. All of them had to demonstrate certain qualities before they were accepted as members. Danny looked at the images of strange beings and exotic planets. The scope of what they were showing him was overwhelming. If this was real, then everything he thought he knew about the universe was wrong. What do you want from me? Danny asked. Margaret leaned forward in her chair. We want you to help us make the case for humanity's inclusion in the Galactic Confederation. In 2 weeks, there will be a council meeting where Earth's status will be decided. We need a human representative who can demonstrate your species' potential. The magnitude of what she was asking began to sink in. They wanted him to represent all of humanity to a council of alien civilizations. Danny Morrison, a mechanic from Chicago, was being asked to speak for his entire species. Danny arrived at Murphy's auto shop the next morning to find a black car parked outside. The vehicle was sleek and expensive looking, not the kind of car that usually needed fixing in this neighborhood. Most of their customers drove old trucks and beaten-up sedans that barely ran. This car looked like it had just rolled off a showroom floor. A woman in a dark business suit stood next to the car waiting. She appeared to be in her 40s with short brown hair and wore glasses with thin metal frames. Her clothes looked expensive and everything about her appearance was perfectly neat. She reminded Danny of the lawyers he had seen on television shows. Danny unlocked the shop door and the woman approached him immediately. She walked with purpose and confidence, like someone who was used to being in charge. Her shoes clicked on the concrete as she moved and she carried a small black briefcase in her left hand. Are you Daniel Morrison? She asked in a clear professional voice. Danny was surprised that she knew his name. Very few people called him Daniel anymore. Even his mother just called him Danny these days. He nodded and waited for her to explain why she was there. My name is Dr. Helen Carter, the woman said, extending her hand for a handshake. I represent a specialized research foundation. I would like to speak with you about a job opportunity. Danny shook her hand and noticed that her grip was firm but somehow felt unusual. Her skin was slightly cooler than normal and her movements seemed very precise, like a dancer or someone who had spent years practicing exact motions. I already have a job, Danny replied, gesturing toward the auto shop. I work here. Dr. Carter smiled, but it looked practiced rather than natural. I understand that, Mr. Morrison. However, I believe you might be interested in what we have to offer. May we speak privately? Danny looked around the empty shop. Old Murphy would not arrive for another hour, and there were no customers yet. He invited Dr. Carter inside and offered her a chair next to his workbench. She sat down carefully, making sure not to get her expensive clothes dirty. Yesterday evening you helped an elderly woman during a storm, Dr. Carter began. Her name was Margaret. Danny was startled. How could this woman possibly know about that? He had not told anyone about helping Margaret. The only other people who knew were the waitress at the diner and the taxi driver. How do you know about that? Danny asked. Margaret is a person of considerable importance, Dr. Carter replied. She was very impressed by your character and has recommended you for a position with our organization. Dr. Carter opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder containing several papers. She handed Danny a business card that felt strange in his hands. The material was not regular paper or plastic, but something that seemed to shimmer slightly when he moved it. We are looking for someone with your particular skills, Dr. Carter continued. You have experience with mechanical systems and problem solving. More importantly, you have demonstrated qualities that are valuable to our research. Danny looked at the business card, but the text seemed to shift slightly as he read it. The company name was listed as Advanced Cultural Research Foundation, but the letters appeared to move when he was not looking directly at them. What kind of research? Danny asked. We study different approaches to problem solving and decision making, Dr. Carter explained. We work with individuals who can think beyond conventional methods. Your background in mechanics is useful, but we are more interested in your ability to assess situations and respond appropriately. The job offer was impressive. Dr. Carter explained that the salary would be 10 times what Danny made at the auto shop. The work would involve analyzing mechanical systems and participating in what she called cross-cultural problem-solving exercises. The details were vague, but the money was real. "This sounds too good to be true," Danny said. "Why me? I never went to college and I am just a mechanic." Dr. Carter leaned forward slightly. "Yesterday you made a choice that revealed something important about your character. When you saw Margaret in distress, you chose to help her despite the inconvenience to yourself. This demonstrates a type of thinking that we value highly." Something about Dr. Carter's way of speaking bothered Danny. Her words were perfectly correct English, but she seemed to choose them very carefully, like someone who had learned the language from books rather than growing up with it. She also had a habit of pausing slightly before answering questions, as if she was translating her thoughts. Old Murphy arrived at the shop and Danny introduced him to Dr. Carter. Murphy was impressed by the job offer and encouraged Danny to seriously consider it. He said that opportunities like this did not come along very often for people from their neighborhood. "You would be crazy to turn down that kind of money," Murphy said after Dr. Carter stepped outside to take a phone call. "Besides, you are too smart to be fixing cars your whole life." Dr. Carter returned and handed Danny another paper from her briefcase. It was an address for a facility located outside the city. She invited him to visit the next day to see their operation and meet with other members of the research team. "I cannot make this decision right now," Danny said. "This is all very sudden and I need time to think about it." "Of course," Dr. Carter replied. "Take all the time you need. However, I should mention that this opportunity is time-sensitive. We begin a new research phase next week and we would need to start your training immediately." Dr. Carter gave Danny her phone number and said she would wait for his decision. She got into her black car and drove away, leaving Danny standing in the parking lot with more questions than answers. The rest of the day passed slowly as Danny tried to focus on his work. He changed the oil in 3 cars and replaced a transmission, but his mind kept returning to the strange job offer. The timing seemed too convenient. One day after helping Margaret, a woman appears offering him a dream job that he was somehow perfectly qualified for. That evening, Danny called his sister Kate and told her about the offer. Kate worked as a nurse at the city hospital and was usually good at giving practical advice. She was excited about the opportunity but warned him to be careful. "Make sure this is legitimate before you quit your job," Kate said. "If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is." Danny agreed to visit their facility the next day but decided he would not make any commitments until he understood exactly what they wanted from him. Danny Morrison pulled his jacket tighter as the rain pounded the streets of Chicago. The cold water ran down his face and soaked through his work boots. He had just finished fixing cars for 12 hours straight at Murphy's auto shop, and all he wanted was to get home to his small apartment. His muscles ached and his hands were still dirty with engine oil despite washing them 3 times. The storm had come out of nowhere. This morning the weather was sunny and warm, but now thick gray clouds covered the sky. Lightning flashed overhead and thunder rolled through the city like a freight train. People ran past him on the sidewalk, covering their heads with newspapers and bags. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry to get somewhere dry and warm. Danny walked quickly down Main Street toward the metro station. The old building had been there since the 1940s and always reminded him of the movies his grandfather used to watch. As he got closer to the station entrance, he noticed someone sitting on the wooden bench outside. It was an elderly woman, and she was completely soaked. The woman looked to be in her 70s with silver hair that was now plastered against her head. She wore a thin blue coat that was no match for this kind of weather. Her hands were folded in her lap and she sat perfectly still, as if the rain was not even touching her. Most people would have been shivering or trying to find shelter, but she just sat there looking straight ahead. Danny slowed his pace as he got closer. Something about the woman bothered him. She looked so small and helpless sitting there in the storm. Water dripped from her coat and formed a puddle around her feet. Her lips had a slight blue tint and her skin looked pale. This was not safe for someone her age. Other people walked past the woman without stopping. A businessman in an expensive suit hurried by while talking loudly on his phone. A group of college students ran past laughing and pushing each other. A mother with 2 small children crossed to the other side of the street. Everyone was focused on getting to their own destination and staying dry. Danny stopped walking and stood about 10 feet away from the bench. He studied the woman's face and noticed her eyes. They were bright blue and seemed very alert despite her age. There was something unusual about the way she looked at the world around her. It was like she was watching everything carefully and taking notes in her mind. The rain kept getting heavier and Danny knew he should keep walking. His apartment was still 6 blocks away and he was already soaked through. His boss Murphy always said that you had to look out for yourself first because nobody else would do it for you. But something about this situation felt wrong. Danny made a decision. He walked over to the bench and stopped in front of the woman. She looked up at him with those bright blue eyes and waited for him to speak. Up close he could see that she was shaking slightly from the cold. "Excuse me, ma'am," Danny said, raising his voice over the sound of the rain. "Are you okay? You're getting pretty wet out here." The woman smiled slightly and nodded. "I am fine, young man. Thank you for asking." Her voice had a strange quality to it. The words were perfectly clear English, but there was something different about the way she spoke. It reminded Danny of his high school teacher who had grown up in Europe. There was a formal quality to her speech that seemed unusual. "This storm is pretty bad," Danny continued. "Would you like to wait somewhere dry? There's a diner just down the street." The woman looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes seemed to be studying his face very carefully. It made Danny feel slightly uncomfortable, like she was reading his thoughts. "That is very kind of you," she said finally. "I would appreciate that very much." Danny helped the woman stand up from the bench. She was lighter than he expected, and moved carefully like someone who was not used to being touched. They walked slowly down the street together with Danny holding his jacket over both of their heads. The woman introduced herself as Margaret but did not give a last name. The diner was warm and bright inside. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air and made Danny realize how hungry he was. He found a booth near the window and helped Margaret sit down. The waitress brought over towels and menus without being asked. Danny ordered coffee and soup for Margaret and just coffee for himself. He was not sure how much money he had in his wallet, and soup was expensive at this place. Margaret wrapped her hands around the coffee cup and seemed to be warming up already. "You work with machines," Margaret said suddenly. It was not a question. Danny looked down at his hands and noticed the grease under his fingernails. "Yeah, I fix cars." "How did you know?" "Your hands tell a story," Margaret replied. "You solve problems that others cannot fix." This seemed like an odd thing to say, but Danny just nodded. Old people sometimes said strange things. His grandmother used to talk about hearing voices in the wind and seeing faces in the clouds. They sat quietly while Margaret ate her soup. Danny watched the rain hit the window and thought about his warm bed waiting at home. The woman ate slowly and carefully, like someone who was not sure about the food. Every few minutes she would look around the diner and observe the other customers. When Margaret finished eating, Danny called a taxi using the diner's phone. The driver arrived quickly and Danny helped Margaret into the back seat. Before the door closed, she reached out and grabbed his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong for such an elderly woman. "Kindness is the rarest element in any galaxy, young man," Margaret said, looking directly into his eyes. "Thank you for reminding me it still exists." Danny was puzzled by her choice of words. Galaxy seemed like an unusual way to describe the world. But he just smiled and told her to stay warm. The taxi drove away into the night and Danny began his walk home through the rain. As he walked, Danny thought about what Margaret had said. Something about her seemed different from other elderly people he had met. The way she spoke and moved was almost like she was from another country or another time. But he was too tired to think about it much. Tomorrow he would go back to fixing cars and forget all about the strange woman in the rain.